All right, let's plug this in. All right, let's see. That goes here. Awesome. Whew, shake it out, everyone. Especially me. All righty. So, welcome everyone. I'm Kathleen McMahon, and I'm here today to talk to you about a design system carnival. One accessible mask, one accessible component, and my pretty mask. Many pretty masks. Before we begin, let's get some details out of the way. And make sure my clicker is on. There we go. My presentation will be posted on Noticed. That is https://NOTIST/RESOURCE11, including links to resources after my talk. I'll also post the full URL on Twitter sometime after my presentation. You can follow me at Resource11 on Twitter, Instagram, and GitHub. Let's back up so I can introduce myself a bit better. I am an engineer, designer, and I like to speak about things. I'm an occasional cyclocross racer, in costume, of course. I'm a lover of lighting. I'm a beach goer, sand dollar collector, lover of my cats Thor and Otis. I'm a crystal collector. I try to get good photos, but Otis interferes often. He has none of it. Thanks, Otis. And now Otis and Thor has learned to interfere with my photographs of sand dollars. Thor is very satisfied. But you can't resist my boys. I am also a senior design systems engineer at Northwestern Mutual, working on the Luna design system. I love my team. They are pretty rad. And I love design systems. It's exciting work, especially if you like herding kittens. Always fun, lots of moving parts. I think design systems are like a carnival. And what do I mean by that? Well, I visited Venice last fall, and I was fascinated by the masks. I loved their beauty, their variety, and they're everywhere. Everywhere you look in Venice, in the shops, the souvenirs. I even made my own mask. And I learned the masks have a rich history of providing access and helping a person blend in, to hide their gender, their identity, their social class. Some of the well-known masks are the Bauta. This mask was great because it had this big jaw, so you could go around and sip drinks and do the things you want to do and not be noticed. There's the Moretta, the Gagna, meow, the Harlequin, and wearing these masks gave you access to places with more freedom, like this parade of gondolas during Venice's Carnival in 2019. Similar to a design system, when well crafted, masks create consistency of experience. So, is the experience consistent for everyone, though? Let's talk accessibility. Our users have different needs at different times. From vision, hearing, motor skills, cognitive, sensory, language needs, bandwidth speed, and more. We have so many needs to take care of, and so often accessibility is what is handled last. And we do not want to leave our users behind. Now, what does this mean in terms of accessible design system components? Well, there is this report called the Web A Million report, and it's been released for the past 5 years now. And if you've read the results, they're a bit concerning. It's an accessibility analysis of the top 1,000 homepages, and I'm going to focus on the amount of ARIA present on the homepage. So from 2019 to 20 through 23, it's been up to a 29% increase in just 1 year, and the amount of ARIA attributes has nearly quadrupled since 2019. So that means that our developers have the best intentions, but they're making the web worse in that spirit of best intentions. So what can we do about this? Well, the W3C's Web Accessibility Initiative page has some fantastic guidelines for us to follow, especially for the ARIA authoring practices. They have design patterns and examples. Now, with all my talks, I generally will give you examples and how-tos and detail every step of the way of how to make a component accessible. And this is not that type of talk. However, I will be providing code examples and resources at the end of the talk. So don't worry, you will not miss anything. I will have the code examples. I will have the notes, because I always provide notes with my deck. So you can sit back, relax, and enjoy the storytelling instead, and the mask. And see how I take this a different way. So we have this one pattern in a design system that is the basis for things like pop-ups, toggle tips, toggle certs, and you can see them used in a component like a terms of service widget. This one pattern has a few uses, and if it's built correctly, can be very powerful in your design system. So the anatomy of a disclosure widget is a button that opens and closes a container and returns focus to the button. And the WAI site has a documented pattern for this basic disclosure widget. The pattern has 3 primary keyboard interactions. So it supports the keyboard presses for spacebar enter key and mouse clicks. The escape key support is for an extended disclosure widget pattern, so that it will be part of what I'm going to be talking about very briefly, but that is not part of the standard disclosure pattern. So when you build a disclosure pattern, you start with a button because you natively get under the hood. Mouse clicks, enter key presses, and spacebar key presses by default. This is just built-in, yay, HTML. We love HTML. I love HTML. And then what you do is you add just enough ARIA support to support screen readers and let them know when a container is being opened and closed, or in any case, if you have many widgets on the page, which container on the page is being opened and closed. So on the button, the attributes you add to the button are ARIA controls, which will tell assistive technology the ID of the associated element the button's controlling. In this case, it would be the ID of the widget. We would basically place the ID of the div that is connected to the button in there because it's controlling the div. And then ARIA expanded to say if the widget is expanded or not. An ARIA label if we want to give a more accurate button label, especially if we are doing icon buttons. And then we'll do some state and click handlers to toggle the container open and closed. So you use the use state hook and use the isOpen state variable and set isOpen function. And you can use the default is expanded prop, pass that in if you want your container to be default open, especially for your terms of service widget, because in banking, my coworker Maria told me this because she used to work at a bank. When you have a terms of service widget on your page in your view, it has to be open by default. So it's nice to have a default expanded state set up for your widget. So it's nice to have that like default is true. And then you can have your, toggle handler in there and pass that handler into your onClick. And then set in some ARIA expanded support, and then pass in your isOpen state to your div. So your children only render if isOpen is true. And you have your state management in, and then you'll add some targeted focus management. So you'll use the useRef hook. And I'm going fast because I want to talk about the problems. You have a useRef hook and a key up handler that will listen for escape key presses. So if escape key is pressed, we are going to send focus right back to that button. We're going to close the div and send focus right back to the button. So it closes your widget. And so it's pretty cool. And the regular disclosure widget does not do that. So it's a nice little UX enhancement, and you should test your users to make sure that all your users are experiencing that on all their assistive technology. And then you can have a key up handler to do, you're having some synthetic events. And I can talk through more of this because I'm going to go fast because we're looking at the timer. Hold on. We're good. 11 minutes. We're halfway through. So we have some button refs, and we're going to talk about focus states here. So with focus states, it's very important to make sure you're actually showing your focus states on your buttons. Your users need to know what is focused on the page. So this is a good way to normalize your focus states on the page, making sure that even if you set your outline to 0, you are replacing that style with something else. So this is a good way to normalize everything on your page. And then you can pick another color that has a contrast ratio of a minimum of 3:1 or greater, because this is for interactive borders, not text. So borders against background is 3:1 minimum. So you can take this, normalize it, and then you can go back and tweak it for any individual CSS files that you need that you want to make it a little different. But it's always important to show this. And then for mouse click management, it's nice to always make sure that if you have multiple components on the page, you only have one component open at a time. So you're going to use the useRef again and pass that in to your disclosure widget ref and make a click outside handler. And if it has the target, set is open to false. And you're going to use that to listen for mouse up and key up clicks. And if it's open, if it's not open, set that handler and make sure it will close your widget. And then do a little bit of cleanup there in the return for your use effect. And also make sure you don't do anything in the re-renders. So you don't have anything re-rendering and spinning away. But once you have this pattern, you can use it to make many pretty masks, like a toggle tip. And which is really cool because you can take this when it's not a tooltip, because tooltips are only on a tooltips interactivity revolves around hover. and maybe focusing on a keyboard. Toggle tip, you toggle it open, you can toggle it closed, you can use the escape to return focus, and the interactions are different. And toggle tips contain interactive content. Tooltips do not. And toggle tips are supported by touch devices, non-mouse pointers, eye trackers, and tooltips are not. But technically, since we've already built in all this support, and I see you see all that nice little pretty button with the text, I know you're going to go back to your office and you're going to do this instead. You're going to make an icon-only button, and you're going to say, I don't want to put any text in there. So we're gonna add some icon support in there, and since icons are informative or decorative, and informative icons need descriptive text, and decorative icons need to be hidden from assistive technology, we are gonna pass in the font awesome icon. And what's awesome about that, and we're gonna gate that behind the icon prop of if the icon's passed in, we'll pass in a font awesome icon. And if the icon prop is not passed in, we won't even render that icon at all. And what I like about the React font awesome icon is under the hood, it uses an SVG. And their team preps their SVG in a way where they set it to be focusable or false, and they hide it as a decorative icon already. So it's up to you to use the ARIA labels and everything else to make it informative if you want it to be. So the font awesome icons will always be informative. It's just the way that they have built it. They've wrapped it in a way that it's always decorative. No matter what, they've always made it decorative unless they have to fix the bug. But so it's a nice way to have a nice decorative icon in here, and then you can pop it in with your icon and have it as a sibling with the span next to the children, so you can have it nicely positioned and use some CSS to balance it. And you can have an icon-only button. And because we have the ARIA label prop there, you can give it a informative label. And because we have that and it's gated in there, you can take that, pass it in ARIA label. You have the support for your icon. Pass it in as the icon-only button is true. And you can add some styles. So you can override some of the styles and pass in, your labels, your icon, pass in some text like that. Voila, toggle tip, and it's accessible. Now you can do a toggle search. And what's cool about this is same pattern, but you can pass in an input and a button. And with this, you can pass in a form, pass in on submit, and prevent the default action for now. And with the input, I have an accessible input in here when I've passed in a label, because no label, no input, the way I've set it up, will not render the input at all. And I have a button in there, and because it's nested within a form, it will be a default type of a submit button. And we've set up this component so you can pass in your text, your icon, and your submit, pass in your labels, and do some targeted focus management. And what I mean by this is the nice UX bonus where you can make another ref, a first item ref. So when you open the container, go back for a second, you will send focus right into that input. I mean, when you want to open a search widget, you want to just start searching. You don't want to just open and then start tabbing. You want to just get to it and just search. So you create this first item ref. So when you open your widget, set that ref. And so you're going to pass in that ref. And in your use effect, in your if statement, you're going to set another nested if. If there is a first item ref prop passed in, send focus to it. And then set it into that, I could never remember the word. Is it the tuple at the end of the use effect? Someone tell me. Words are hard. Someone will tell me after the talk. The array. Thank you. Hip, hip, array. You rock. So this is the second argument in the array. We have that to prevent re-renders. And then moving on. Because of that, now we have an embedded search with targeted focus management. But now we have all these good things in our disclosure widget, and we're like, this is a cool pattern. But this is where it gets tricky, because this is where developers are like, ooh, this is cool. I could do a lot of things here. What else can I do here? And it gets really tempting as a developer. You're like, I got this cool pattern. It opens things, closes things. I get focus management. I get keyboard management. What if your designer then comes up with this pattern? They send this to you. You're like, oh, this looks like a hamburger nav. You're like, that looks like a good case for a disclosure pattern. I'm a design system developer. Like, it's nav, but those are links, or are they buttons? Well, they should look like links, not buttons. So let's adjust them for a second, because that's less of a buttony look, because we want to communicate the intent to our users. So we're not confused, because cognitive accessibility is important too. But let's get back to building it. Okay. Oh, we can add some links in there, right? Yeah, this is cool. All right, so let's add some links into our disclosure widget. Now, just like a quick way of doing it, it's like we just pass in an unordered list, right, and map in some links. You're like, oh, this is cool. We could just do this, right? We could just map in some links, and hey, we have a widget with like a hamburger menu, and make just this toggle menu links just to have a quick thing without even making a component. That could be fun. We could do buttons. That could be nice. What else could we do with this? We could do some roving focus. Like maybe we want to add something like, up and down arrow keys, because sometimes you can do that with your list, where you can use your arrow keys to go up and down, and the optional home and end, because you see some of those patterns when you look in those WAI sites. You're like, oh, that's kind of nice. Why don't we add that to our component? That could be fun. Oh, wait, but we're doing a list, but with this list, how about instead of passing in a link or a button, let's make this funky tag component. With the tag, we can just make this tag, and then we can just pass in whatever tag we want into this component. What could go wrong? Because then the tag, we can pass in an a tag. We could pass in a link. We could pass in a button. We could pass in checkbox. We could pass in, radio button. This could be really cool. This could be really powerful. And while we're here, then we can start working on some separation of concerns. And so then we can go, okay, now that we have this fancy tag, we could make a list item, and then we can make a list, and we have this roving focus, and we can start building this pattern. Oh, this is getting fun. And our component's getting kind of big. And maybe some ternary magic, all right, oh, and then in maybe our disclosure widget, Uber widget, we could have maybe our main widget. But then if it's a list, we could pass in a list prop. And then if it's a list, we could pass in the list. And with the list, we could pass in a tag. And if it is a tag, we could pass in whatever tag we want. So what could go wrong? It could be a bad idea, because at this point, what pattern is this? Because now we're starting to dipping into different patterns. Because right now we went from a disclosure pattern to a menu bar pattern. And the menu bar pattern has menu item roles and menu item checkbox and menu item radio roles, and there's all these different states for you have to do a role of menu, and all these different things that you have to be very careful about putting them in when you have list items and unordered lists. And with a disclosure widget, it works when you have an unordered list for a hamburger menu, but when you start thinking about those mega menus at the top of a nav that have those flyouts that go to the left. Which is simulating those desktop menus. Remember the desktop menus, like Electron or like anything else? That's what those mega menus are trying to simulate of, with the nav and the checkboxes and the radios. That is what a mega menu pattern is. And so there's this confusion between when a designer comes in with a pattern, they see this beautiful pattern and they don't understand like the logic that's behind these two patterns that are being coded versus what's you see in a design. And then it gets mixed into your disclosure widget. And then it doesn't get documented. And then you get this mega component. And then people start using it. And then you get into an accessibility audit. And then there's this mess. And so you have these components with this pattern that looks like this versus this. Whoa. So you're kind of making unwise decisions. Like Jell-O with shellfish. And things can go wrong very quickly. So you really shouldn't be mixing your masks. You should be, separating out your components into their purposeful intent. And because if you mix your masks, you may think that that magical mask will give you that exclusive freedom and access to that wonderful carnival masquerade, but instead you may end up at this completely different carnival like this, and things can go wrong very quickly. And I'm very sad that my songs are not working, but they're not. But there's a song that was going along right here, and then it could go wrong even worse right here. So sad. But there, it goes very wrong. Look how wrong it goes. And we have a car. Look, oh God, here comes the carousel. We do. We have a magical carousel. But I do have to say, there's the OpenAI W3C working group, and they are working on a solution. They are working on a solution for these native components that are going to handle all this complex stuff for us. So a solution is coming. And Una Kravitz is going to talk briefly about this tomorrow. So I am very happy to know that a solution is coming. So definitely check out Una's talk tomorrow and avoid chaotic carnivals like this Via Reggio Carnival that has some extremely large floats in Italy. So to wrap up, design systems are carnival. Our users are diverse. Do not mix your masks or you'll make bad choices and may end up at a completely different carnival and with a completely different experience than you wanted. And design systems are always the hotness. Thank you.